to get our students to make goals and understand the little steps that it takes to get to their big goals. So first we're going to start out with, what is a goal? And so you might talk with your students about, a goal is a long-term outcome that you strive for and gives you direction and focus. So you don't just want to go in willy-nilly and say, okay, well let's start working on your ACT scores. You know, you need to start looking at what they would like to work on or what they need to be working on. So it's not specifically measurable, but you can take measurable steps to get to that goal. And how do you get to those goals? Those are objectives. Those are the little steps that you're going to be taking, and later on we're going to look at SMART goals, which is a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely goal. And some of the tips for the coaches, you might ask questions of your students and brainstorm if they don't know. You might just talk about like what they're going through in high school, what they went through last year, and so don't get caught up on the shoulds. So if you're feeling really heavy about getting their ACT score up, but they can't even do so well in math right now, so you might want to work on those class scores first. And then remember that we are using those goals to guide ourselves as well as our students. So later on, Lauren's going to be talking about the timelines for reaching those goals. And this is just a little visual about a goal. So our instructional goal, we're going to be looking at what the current goal is, if there's a need or a gap in what they ought to be doing, and what they ought to be doing, students. Is that kind of clear with everybody, or do we need to go a little bit more in depth with that?
Okay. So will you pull up the goal tracking worksheet?
The one I'm on right now?
Yes. Okay. When you print this out, it does print out not black, just but you have to download it. You can't print it straight from there because that's print. That probably is the thing too. So as Whitney said, getting our students to make goals is like a huge underlying process of it. We're going to make goals for how they are in school, goals for what career they want, goals for what post-secondary option they have to go down. All that includes with financial aid and everything like that. You scroll down to the middle part of it. So there are lots of like levels of goals, and as we discussed, and Heather's going to talk about a little bit more in just a while, there's like long-term overarching goals, then there are short-term goals, and then there are objectives or like small specific steps that you take to reach all of these goals. And so for trying to think of an organization way to put together all of these different long-term goals that students may be working on, we broke it down into 6 different long-term categories that really align with the curriculum actually that we're doing. So one of the big long-term goals that a student could be making is on GPA. And so you could break down that goal into having specific objectives for test goals, needing to get a certain grade in a specific class, identifying the work that they need to do with a task list, actually finishing and turning in their homework, reaching out to teachers, seeking out tutoring, identifying peers. These are all examples of like smaller objective steps that you could take to reach that overall GPA goal, whether that be I want to have a 2.0 this semester, I need a 2.0 overall so that I can get into this concurrent program. Whatever it is that they need to do, it can be broken down here. And if you have other things that you would like that you think could be added to that list, please let us know. Same thing with entrance exams. That's another huge part of our curriculum. So once a student figures out which entrance exam that they need to take, making that a long-term goal and then breaking it down into smaller goals and steps is going to be important too. Same with the career goal when you do career exploration. Same with, I have it listed on here as college goal, but depending on what track they're doing, you can make it a military goal or a training goal if they're going into a specific skill area. Figuring out those deadlines, majors, everything like that. And And then same thing with scholarships and financial aid. And this will probably be bigger for seniors and juniors as opposed to sophomores. But sophomores, it could be just being aware of what FAFSA is, could be their financial aid goal. So again, the large goals are going to be dependent in terms of their specifics and the SMART goals on the year that a student is. Sophomores are going to be a lot more exploratory, like figuring stuff out, maybe knowledge-oriented or future-oriented. Juniors is going to be finding out knowledge and preparing for that senior year. They may be able to nail down a few more specifics before they actually have to go through the application process or that sort of thing. Seniors, those goals are going to be pretty specific and quick going right from the start. So, this is just a brainstorm list for you all to have. It is not exhaustive by any means.
Sorry. I don't know why you guys let me do this. This is bad.
But, here, actually stay up at that front, that top page.
Okay.
But so what we have created here is a sheet that can go in the student folders that we're going to give them so that they can keep track on one page all of their kind of overarching goals. And this would just be the overarching goal. It's not going to be all those specific steps that they're going to do. But then that way at the end of the year they can know, well, I have a goal to become a nurse. So that's my career goal. So my career goal is to become a nurse. My college goal would be to get into the CNA program or a specific pre-med school, whatever. In order to do that, I have to get a GPA of 2.0. That's my GPA goal. I know that I have to apply for the lottery scholarship. That's my financial aid goal. And then I need to take the Compass exam to get into the CNA. So those would be like all of the major goals that will come throughout the year. They have them here. And then you, the coach, can keep track for each student that you have what their GPA goal is, what their college goal is, what their career goal is, all in one spot so that it can just help with your organization as well. Does that make sense?
I have a question about, like, the middle page where you listed all the, like, little goals that could be in overall categories. That's something that we could also give our students, because I feel like that could be a really good, like, brainstorming tool for them. Because sometimes when you're like, what's your goal? And they're like, but maybe if they have some ideas, they're like, oh yeah, maybe I do want to focus on that. Or do you think that's too overwhelming, or?
Submit that you never thought about.
It could, do you think you could?
I think you could. I think you could also frame it as like open-ended questions, like,
Yeah.
have you thought about what you might want to major in one day? If you say, do you have a college goal, and they say, I don't know, you know. So it might be just asking those questions to get them to think about that stuff.
And then if you're engaging them in the brainstorming process, with you already knowing like all these different things that you can bring up through those questions, it's gonna actually help with their self-efficacy and being able to think of that too, if they're engaging in the process as well. But we could make a student sheet too if you'd like.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I think that, Carolyn, you made an excellent point. It's important to look at the language and listen to the language we're using. So you can say goal and objective, but the students still might not get that even though they like, okay, well, an objective is a small step. So you might want to break that down even more, like you said, and we could use this as a brainstorm. So what's your major? But they might not even know what a major is. So you might say, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? What do you see yourself doing after high school? And if they can't look that far, like, what do you like to do on your free time?
Alright, so I think that's this one. Should we do?
Sure. Okay. Let's get these controls. Squeeze through here. Okay, so this, again, guys, guys, we have a lot of goal sheets, and you don't have to use every single one. I just wanna make that very clear. You don't have to use all of these sheets. There are a lot of sheets for you to choose from, whatever works best for you. We gave you a lot of options so that it would fit well with you guys, okay? So this is where we're gonna put that long-term goal that Taylor was talking about. Your GPA goal, your career goal, your college goal, whatever it might be, they can list here, okay? The short-term goals, what are we gonna do to get there? So maybe your career goal is, I wanna be a nurse. Well, to do that, I've gotta get a certain GPA, I've got to take a certain exam, I've got to get into a certain program. So those might be short-term goals. So they could be long-term goals, but they could also be short-term goals, right? And then once you have those short-term goals, you're gonna need to break those down into action steps. So, okay, your short-term goal might be, I need to increase my GPA because I wanna be a nurse. Does that make sense? Are we going along? Okay, so to increase my GPA, I need to make an A on my science test. Sorry, Casey. I need to make an A on my science test. I need to get a recommendation from a teacher, you know, there are all these.
Homework and English.
Right. And so then, that's where you list those steps out. Then over here in this column, they can put a deadline, which goes back to those measurable, timely goals, right? So what could we say? I wanna study 4 times this week. Well, our deadline would be by the end of this week, right? Does that make sense, how to use this? Okay. If you'll scroll down just a little bit, Whitney. Support network, that goes into our SECT. Remember when we talked about barriers and supports and all that stuff that ties into SECT? That's where they can identify those people that are gonna help them, those social resources. Okay, I need to get my GPA up, I need to make an A on my science test. Who's gonna help me with that? Who can I go to? I can go get tutoring, I can ask my teacher, I can get with a group of study friends, I can ask questions in class. It's just identifying those resources that are gonna help them, yeah. And then obstacles, that goes back to those barriers that we talked about, the perceived barriers. Well, whenever you're doing this with your students saying, okay, what might get in your way? You wanna raise your GPA so you can be a nurse, what might get in your way of that? It could be, I have to babysit my little brother and sister tonight, so I can't study for my test tonight, I might have to wait until tomorrow. It's just identifying those barriers so they know what they have to overcome, that way they're aware of it, yes? Cool. Do you think this is helpful?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So, question, so, I'm sorry, you might have said this, so do we need to give this to them, like, as soon as we meet them, or is this like a week by week thing that I mean, obviously, long-term goals, it's gonna be
Right,
longer,
right. I think that is up to your discretion, however often you think, whatever time frame you meet with your students, I know it's different for all of us, so it could be given on a weekly basis, but I think maybe
just, yeah,
every
Like
once in a
the
while,
whole
just, cause we've got a lot of goal sheets that you can use to track
okay.
that, this is just one of them, so.
Okay.
This seems like it can get kind of complicated too, because if one of your goals is, I wanna raise my GPA,
Mhm.
or I wanna do better in this class, then we have to go to this, like, we don't even know how.
Right, right,
Right, and so that's where a lot of the interventions that you're gonna be working with them on are gonna tie into what they'll be doing with their goals. When you're going over the pro-academic study skills or test taking, stuff like that, that's where you're gonna help provide that information so that they then can accomplish their
And
goals.
in the example you used where I need a 2.0 to get into college, well, a 2.0 is not gonna get you into nursing.
well, there's a CNA
There's a
program.
CNA program
Yeah.
for,
Oh, it's, okay,
yeah, so,
Like with NTI.
okay.
yeah, so that may not be nursing school, but it's.
It might be secondary.
Yes.
Well, I guess my point, I wasn't so concerned about the GPA, my concern is the study skills, you're gonna have to ratchet it up after high school. is what
Oh,
I mean.
yeah.
So just-
And starting that conversation now with students,
Yeah.
that's gonna be really good self-awareness for them to have, leaving. So this is another sheet that's very similar to what, Heather just went over, if this makes more sense to you of how to do it. Heather and I had a version of this past year, and would, as we got further into the year, would just give this to our student at the beginning of our session. And they would fill it out in the first 2 or 3 minutes, because we had already talked about what goals were, and they kind of knew about what it was. And then it just gave us new talking points before we went on to our intervention for that session. But again, it gets them thinking about what goal it is that they're focused on, whether it's their GPA or whether it was their career exploration or college exploration or that sort of thing. And then getting them to think about their action steps, specific goals for this week. I need to turn in all of my homework in geometry, that sort of thing. This asks about what successes have you seen in accomplishing your goals so far. One really important thing to remember with your students is to point out successes that they have, even if they are super small, because that's going to help in building their confidence and being able to do more and more things. Again, what might prevent you from being able to reach this, looking at those barriers. This question was always really important to me with my students of why do you want to keep working towards your goal. A lot of my students made GPA goals and they always tied it to college and getting in there, and that is a huge motivating force for them. So keeping to remind them was really important. And then by when do you want to have your goal completed? Again, that timeliness, focusing on deadlines so that it's not just this nebulous, I'm going to go to college type goal. So this is just another version. Again, you do not have to use all of these sheets with all of your students, but whatever, if this fits you, go for it. Okay, should we go into? Okay, that's cool. All right, so we just threw a lot of goal sheets at you, and so following up with these goals is going to be really important too. So one of the things that we made just as help for a coach organization is this goal tracking Excel sheet. So when you go over an initial goal with your student, so say maybe your second or third meeting in October, so maybe it's like October 3rd, your student says that the first goal that they want to focus on is they want to increase their GPA to a 2.5 or something like that. And specifically, they want to get a B in chemistry. Okay, so you can be taking down notes as they fill out their sheet or as you're talking to them or even after your meeting if that works for you too. I met with them October 3rd. Their goal is to increase GPA, specifically getting a B in chemistry. The action steps that they told me they were going to do was talk to their teacher about tutoring and go in, turn in all of their homework this week, and study for their test were the 3 action steps that they were going to do. And then when you meet with them the next time, you go through and do follow-up to see, well, did you actually follow through on those goals? How did going to tutoring go? Was it helpful for you? Kind of help them process that as well. And then that way you can see if there were still barriers that were in the way, if they had successes, and then you have a follow-up date. And then that way you can keep this sheet for each one of your students, so you can have that goal tracking progress throughout the year. Does that make sense?
And the follow-up, just to say this, the follow-up for this is almost, I think, as important as setting the goal in the first place. So I think it's real important to track what your students are doing and to continue to follow up with them each time you meet with them, even if it's, a small goal. We'll just go ahead and check in and see if they've gotten there.
Well, and keeping track of these goals, like Josh said, with the follow-up at the end of the year, to be able to say, okay, this is the goal that you set at the beginning of the year, and look at what all you've done this year. Look at how awesome and great you are. Or look at what we could have done better. Look at what we need to work on for next year. Look at what we've missed over, right? So it's really important to be able to know that information, because with 25 students and some of us with 50, you're gonna forget pieces.
Yeah.
That lends to SCCT then, because one of the parts of building self-efficacy is looking at your own performance.
Yes,
Right.
very much so. And so, like, what we're doing is a very structured, goal-oriented thing by having them fill out sheets and think about these specific action steps. But it is amazing, like, what you will see with your students of how things become more natural to them, and it's not as, like, at the beginning of the year, it felt like it was kind of pulling teeth, trying to get them to think of, like, specific things to do. But by having us practice in a very structured way, this goal process, that's something that they're gonna take with them when they graduate into their senior year or what have you, and they're gonna start doing goals and making action steps and following through on things themselves too. So that's part of building their self-awareness.
And if it would be beneficial, I mean, we could build this into that same Excel spreadsheet we use for weekly documentation and have, you know, different worksheets, not for our purposes as a leadership team, but for you guys, just so it's all in one place. I mean, if that's something, you know, we could, I'm just saying it's an Excel spreadsheet, we can incorporate this in there so that you're just working from the same thing. Just a thought.
No, it's just more insane.
You wanna do this one? No, I can do this one. Okay, you pull it up on, I think it's the. Okay, so you guys remember the SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Okay, so this is, we have 2 different SMART goal sheets. The one that Whitney's gonna show you next is the one I think primarily everyone used last year. The spaces to write are just a little bit small, so I made this one this year so that the boxes are a little bit bigger so that you can fit more stuff in. And there's some different questions on here too that'll get you thinking about specific, measurable, all that stuff. So specific, who, what, when, where, why, and how. Who's gonna help you, what are you gonna do, when are you gonna do it, where are you gonna do it, going through those.
And why, again, is really important for that motivation factor.
And the investment factor too. Measurable, how are you gonna know when you've reached it? How are you gonna display by your behaviors or by your actions that you've accomplished your goal? Is it gonna be having that A on your test, or is it gonna be being able to see your transcript and see that you've gotten your GPA up to where you want it? How are you gonna know when you've gotten there, right? Attainable, can you see yourself achieving it, and can you break it down into manageable pieces? Is it doable, right? Realistic, is it too difficult or is it too easy? You don't wanna set a goal that, what was it, Josh, your Gills example that you gave?
I wanna breathe as underwater can be an attainable goal, but it is not realistic if you say that you're going to sprout gills.
Exactly. Right.
And then timely, when do you wanna reach your goal by? So being able to tie that measurable back in to show I'm going to have an A on my transcript by this date, right? And so then there's a space right here to write what their deadline is for reaching their goal. Are there any questions on this?
So in relation to the other goal sheet that has the long-term and short-term goals, how would we use these together? I mean, we have them fill this out and then translate that into SMART goals, or vice? Does my
I
question
would
make
see
sense?
more of the smart one being first,
Yeah.
to get them to think of that over a long-term goal, and then you can.
Yeah,
Like the ones thing.
this would be more for the long-term one, like kind of that overarching,
Okay.
I want a GPA of 2.0 by the end of this year, okay? And then the smaller one with the action steps is where you break it down into the smaller steps that they can do on a weekly basis. That long-term goal of getting a 2.0, you aren't going to be able to see or really measure until the end of the semester or the end of the year. But as you're going through and doing all those action steps too, you wanna keep in mind these qualities even if you're not filling out this specific SMART goal worksheet for each of the action steps and objectives, small goals.
Any other questions on this one?
Do the handbook first and
This is the brochure that we developed last year. I think Betsy and Sarah worked on it.
this is the handbook. It's on the back of the brochure too.
Yes. And so, basically, it's putting SMART goals into little thought bubbles. So you have to recognize that your students have different learning styles. So they might feel more important about their more idealistic about their goals if they can think about them in little thought bubbles. Or they might be a streamlined thinker and they just want to go bam, bam, bam and get it all done. So starting out with specific, what is your goal? And then measurable, it kind of goes into the same thing. How is your goal measurable? What will you measure? How will you know when you've met the goal? And then is it attainable? How do you know it's possible? Realistic, how is your goal realistic? And how can you do it? And then is it timely? So the difference between attainable and realistic is that timely factor. And so I think Dr. Greenleaf used an example about like, I want to use a marathon. That could be or I want to run in a marathon. And that could be a realistic goal, but is it attainable? No, the marathon is tomorrow. So maybe if the marathon was next year and you spent all your time training for that, then you could attain that. And then, and so this is the little brochure. The students can have it. They could even take it home to their parents and say, look, this is what I've been working on. It's fun. And they can put their name on it. I don't
And
know,
it's
whenever I was in
colorful.
high school, I like to put my name on things. I was a weirdo. And so this goes into, you could present this if you had a PowerPoint with your students, or you could hand them out the brochures if you didn't have internet access, and go through specifically what each detail of the SMART goals are. S is specific and what that means, who, what, where, when. Measurable, a statement to measure your goal. Attainable, you can develop those attitudes and beliefs and skills that you need to get that goal, and then you can plan accordingly to see if it's realistic. And then time-wise, setting small goals, even like increments, like, okay, at the end of this week, I'm going to turn in one homework assignment that is past due. And then the next week, you turn in 2 assignments. So you might work with your teachers on that as well. And then these are some goal tips. Just developing several goals, so you might have some to choose from. Goals are not wishes. I want to lacks the power of will, so you might encourage your students to make I statements that say I will do this. And then share your goals with somebody. Talk to your students about, well, have you shared this with your parents? Have you shared it with any of your friends? Do you have goals that are common with your friends? So even
sharing it with teachers.
Yeah,
too.
sharing it with
That way the
teachers.
teachers are aware.
Yeah, letting the student know it's okay to tell your teacher, I want to turn in my homework, I will turn in my homework. It's gonna happen.
And with that, you can have them set up like accountability partners, not only just with you holding them accountable as a coach by going through their follow-up, but getting someone else to kind of be there with them.
And this is in a format, when we print it too, it actually is a brochure,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I can pass this around so that everybody can see it. Like, if it's not foldable now, but you can fold it this way.
Okay.
And this may also be
But
something.
disregard this sheet on the back.
Yeah, this may also be something that we want to just include in that student folder
Yeah.
that we give them at the beginning, so that they have all this information on SMART goals and what they are at the beginning.
And for, this brochure is really cool, but as we go through some of these things over the next 2 weeks, you'll realize that, they're just, some of them are just handout pieces of paper with our Razor Coach logo. So the formatting on these are pretty basic, but that was because really we focused in June on the content, what was gonna be involved in them, and didn't spend a whole lot of time on formatting. So don't worry about the formatting now, but as we go throughout the year, maybe we can make these a little prettier. And we're not a Trio program yet. We don't have our what do they call them, laminated, hard copy, colorful things yet, but we're getting there.
And you can make a
Jen,
copy
we'll
of
help on
that goal sheet with your students, and so you can keep it, and they can take it to their teachers or their parents and say, okay, I don't know how to express this goal, but this is what I'm working on. I have a specific goal, it's measurable, I'm going to get it done by this time.
And in terms of like building relationships with teachers, especially who are very concerned about students and what they're doing and what their grades are and that sort of thing, being able to say like, yes, we are working on these goals and we've seen progress and that sort of thing, it would be a really good thing to be able to share with teachers. Heather and Whitney are going to do a videoed role play by the end of this week, so we will have an example of how to set up a SMART goal with a student for you to see and review and go back and make notes on how you process and that sort of thing. So that role play
Because like they were saying, I think there'll be a lot of times you'll approach a student about a goal and like Taylor said, it'd be like pulling teeth, so I think having that role play and then maybe coming back, we can talk about that, maybe some different scenarios that you guys ran into last year and go from there.
And again, it's like, it's all in how you approach it and just that building of relationships and doing goals. Like, this isn't something just to like check off, like, yes, I made a goal with them. It's really for their benefit to help them become more self-aware and confident and all that sort of stuff.
Good job, thank you. What do you guys think about going from goals to either the professional communication or the classroom behavior part?
I think going to professional communication sounds great.
Okay,
All right, let's do this.
well, let's do that.
That's just me.
While you guys are getting started, I just want to touch on one more thing, add to what Taylor said at the end about